Life sometimes gets us confused, especially when we think about the contingent of people in the economy who constantly live paycheck to paycheck, even though they put in twice as much input and twice as much effort. And then there is also the top 1% or the ultra rich who tend to have access to all the good things in the economy, even though they put in twice as little as the people that actually have to go through the hustle and the bustle on a daily basis to earn a living. And so Napoleon Hill dedicated 20 years of his life setting out to identify the key determinants of success. And so in this video, we'll be looking at those 7 laws of success that he talks about in this book, Think and Grow Rich. And so if you're new here, my name is Nana. I hold a master's degree in business finance. And on this channel, we discuss everything personal finance and personal development. And so without further ado, we go to the first law, which is the law of definiteness of purpose. So Napoleon Hill believes that before any man or woman can actually see success, they have to do one thing, and that is to define their goal or their purpose in life. And that definite chief aim is that goal that supersedes every single desire that you have in life, in that you're willing to subordinate any other desire or any other goal for that one goal. So for instance, if you have the goal of becoming rich at the end of the year, then that becomes your definite chief aim. And it goes on to actually advise that you have to write that goal down and then repeat it to yourself, probably on a daily basis. If that is too much or cumbersome for you, then you might consider seeing your goal on a weekly basis, because what that does is that it helps you to actually ensure the discipline and to, more importantly, motivate yourself and then steer yourself towards the attainment of that goal. What you have to do is that sit down and ask yourself, what is the one thing that if I had in life, it would solve most of my problems? That can in the near future become that definite chief aim that you're willing to pursue and then subsequently attain. And so define that purpose, sit down and then write the goal. And then if possible, come up with actionable plans, break them down into tiny steps that would help you to attain that goal. This brings us to the second law, and that is the law of autosuggestion. So what you need to know is that the brain, according to Napoleon Hill, is made up of 2 parts. That is 1, the conscious part, and then 2, the subconscious part. He believes that the conscious part of the brain is that part of the brain that is responsible for interpreting our desires and things that we actually see in the external environment. However, the subconscious part of the brain is a part of the brain that is responsible for our emotions and our feelings. And so more often than not, we are emotional beings. And so we respond to things in the outside world emotionally, and then subsequently we find logical reasons to back our emotional actions and inactions. So what you need to know is that there is a part of the brain that is responsible for everything that you do, and that the body is just an execution tool. So if you really want to become successful, then there's one thing that you need to do. That is to power up the version or the part of the brain that is responsible for your actions and inactions, and that is the subconscious mind. And the only way, according to Napoleon Hill, that you can do this is to master the power or the law of autosuggestion, in that you convince yourself and then block out any noise coming from the outside. So more often than not, when we set goals, people tend to sow seeds of discord and several confusion along the line, in that they try as much as possible to hold us down, tell us things, and then tell us why we cannot achieve that goal. As opposed to that, what Napoleon Hill goes on to advise is that try as much as possible and then become solid mentally, and then convince yourself beyond reasonable doubt that come what may, you still have what it takes and you're competent enough, and you're not going to throw in the towel. Instead, what you do is to convince yourself and to motivate yourself, have unlimited access to intrinsic motivation, and that would in the long run steer you towards the attainment of whatever goal that you set for yourself. This brings us to the third law, and that is the law of faith and belief. So according to Napoleon Hill, it's not enough for you to have just a definite chief aim and of course coming up with actionable plans to attain same. What you need to do instead is to try and action out your faith. So you need to back up those plans with the principle of applied faith, which simply means that you need to convince yourself beyond reasonable doubt. No matter whatever challenges that you may come across in the pursuit of your goals, you still believe that you can and you still make it to the end of the goal. And so what people tend to do at this point is that they resort to the law of vicarious mastery, which is the degree or the extent to which people tend to believe in themselves just by seeing other people realize the goals or similar goals that they set for themselves. So for example, in a clear instance where you want to set a goal to become financially free, just by looking at people like Warren Buffett become successful in life throughout all these decades of investing in the stock market actually gives you some level of confidence that if Warren Buffett has been able to do it, then of course you would also be able to do it. And so that is a degree to which you need to convince yourself in order to back yourself up with the faith that is required for you to become successful, according to Napoleon Hill. This brings us to the fourth law, and that is the law of the mastermind. And so Napoleon Hill believes that you cannot go on to become successful on your own. Come what may, you may have to rely on the expertise or the experience of other people when it comes to the pursuit and the subsequent attainment of goals. And so he believes that the best thing you can do for yourself is to choose your circle wisely, because the people that you associate with would actually, to a larger extent, determine whether or not you become successful when it comes to the pursuit and the subsequent attainment of your goals. And so he goes on to cite the example that someone as great of an inventor like Thomas Edison had to fall on the marketing skills of Edward C. Barnes when it comes to selling his innovations to the public. And so what you need to do is that you need to find someone with like-mindedness and people who have the skill that would complement and then try as much as possible to challenge yourself and to motivate you towards the attainment of your goals. This brings us to the fifth law, and that is the law of habit. So habits are one of the greatest ways that you can actually see success. According to James Clear, what you have to do is that you need to start small and then build over time. But more often than not, the mistakes that we make as people is that when we set goals, we focus so much on the goals that we omit whatever necessary steps we have to take or the processes that we have to adopt in order to get to the goal. And so what you need to do simply is to try as much as possible and then increase friction with any habit that would likely stand in between you and your goals, and then decrease the friction that is associated with the good habits that would eventually steer you towards the attainment of your goals. Build habits as opposed to finding motivation, because motivation to a larger extent can fail sometimes. However, finding the consistency through building habits would ensure that consistently you contribute even in the most minute way towards the attainment of your goal. And that is the surest way for you to see success. This brings us to the sixth law of success, and that is the law of compensation. So Napoleon Hill believes that you receive exactly what you give, and so do unto others what you'd wish them do unto you. And that is a golden rule, and it applies everywhere in life. It applies in your social life, in the family. It also applies even in the pursuit of your goals. What you need to do is that you need to try as much as possible and then give much input, which would eventually secure the outputs that you may receive in the future. So for instance, if you have the goal of actually becoming successful financially in the future, what you have to do now is to try as much as possible, live below your means, invest more, and then save more. All these things would actually ensure that in the long run, your output will be fortified and then it will be rest assured to be delivered to you. More often than not, what people tend to do is that anytime that they feel like they are not seeing any returns or they are giving too much, they cut back on it. But Napoleon Hill believes that consistently contributing, irrespective of whatever you're gaining, eventually will see the universe return any favor or whatever good deeds that you went out to give or the good things that you did for people. And so the best way to become successful in life, according to Napoleon Hill, is to try as much as possible and then give the best that you can in life. This brings us to the seventh and the last law, and that is the law of infinite intelligence. So Napoleon Hill believes that in order for any man to become successful, you need to reach out beyond the five senses that you have currently. So what you can do instead is to meditate or practice the power of imagination. So go beyond what you can see and go beyond what is a reality. Try as much as possible and then visualize the goal in your mind. See the goal or see the end right from the beginning. That is what would ensure the subsequent attainment of your goals. And so constantly listening or probably meditating or even going on to visualize things would help you to reach out to the version of yourself that wouldn't struggle in any way to attain your goals. Thank you for spending time with us. These are the 7 laws that, according to Napoleon Hill, if you're able to master, you're surely going to see success.